Real revenge isn't anger, tears, or trying to make him regret you. Real revenge is healing, because when you rise without him, you show him something he never expected, that the version of you he broke is not the version of you that survives. Healing is the closure you give yourself, and that's the part no one teaches you. We're conditioned to believe closure comes from a conversation, a confession, or a perfectly packaged explanation from the person who hurt us. But real life doesn't work like that. People rarely give the closure we want, especially the ones who caused the pain in the first place. They don't suddenly grow emotional maturity because you need it. They don't magically develop honesty because you're hurting. They don't become self-aware simply because you crave understanding. Waiting for closure from someone who struggled to give you honesty, even when you were together, is like waiting for someone who never showed up the entire relationship to suddenly become reliable. And that waiting keeps you stuck. The truth is, closure isn't something he gives you. Closure is something you decide. Healing becomes the closure because healing shifts the power back to you. You are no longer depending on him to finish an emotional sentence he started. You end it yourself, and that moment is the beginning of real freedom. It's the moment you stop tying your peace to his actions. It's the moment you stop waiting for him to repair something he doesn't even know how to hold properly. When you choose to heal without him, you're choosing to stop bleeding from a wound he has no intention of tending to. You're choosing to stop checking his updates, stop rehearsing conversations that will never happen, stop searching for meaning in his silence. Healing means you finally take responsibility for your own heart, not the pain he caused, but the power you have to move forward. It's the moment you say, I don't need you to make sense of this for me. I can make sense of it on my own. And that's the closure you actually needed all along. Closure is clarity, and healing gives you that clarity piece by piece. You begin to see who he truly was instead of who you hoped he'd be. You start realizing the red flags you ignored, the patterns you excused, the moments you stayed silent just to keep the peace. Healing doesn't rewrite the story, it reveals it honestly, and that honesty is what liberates you. What makes this the revenge he never expected is that healing removes the power he once had. As long as you're waiting for closure from him, he still occupies emotional space in your mind. As long as you're replaying the past, he still shapes your present. But the moment you give yourself closure, he becomes irrelevant to your growth. You start living in a world where he no longer gets to dictate how you feel. That emotional liberation is something he never saw coming. He expected you to linger. He expected you to need him for answers. He expected your heart to stay tethered to his inconsistency. But healing breaks that tether. Healing also rewrites the story in a way that empowers you instead of defeating you. You begin to understand that the relationship ended because it was misaligned, not because you weren't enough. You stop blaming yourself. You stop fantasizing about what could have been. You stop romanticizing someone who didn't show up. Healing gives you the closure of finally seeing the truth. Sometimes losing someone is actually protecting yourself. And when you rise with that awareness, when you detach without bitterness, when you build a life that isn't defined by being hurt, that's when the shift becomes undeniable. Healing is the one thing he couldn't predict because he assumed his absence would break you, but instead, his absence became the catalyst for you becoming stronger. Closure, given by him, might have soothed you temporarily, but closure given by yourself transforms you permanently. That transformation is the revenge he never expected, because nothing is more powerful than a woman who heals herself and never looks back. When someone leaves your life, especially someone you pictured a future with, the first instinct is to assume the story ends there. That the moment they walk away, your capacity to grow, evolve, or bloom goes with them. But healing without him is the moment you begin to reclaim the version of yourself you lost in the noise, the version that didn't depend on someone else's attention to feel worthy. This phase isn't just about getting over him. It's about clearing the emotional space he once occupied so something better, deeper, and more aligned with who you truly are can take root. You may not realize how much of your emotional bandwidth he was using until he's gone. The overthinking, the waiting, the hoping, the analyzing every message or silence, it all drains parts of you that could be invested in your growth, your peace, your goals, and your future. Healing without him means you redirect all that energy inward. You start asking different questions, not why didn't he choose me, but why was I willing to settle for someone who made me question myself? Not what's wrong with me, but why did I forget how extraordinary I am? These questions don't come from hurt, they come from awakening. Every time you choose peace over his chaos, you send a message to your own heart, I matter too. And that is a message he was never helping reinforce. When you're with someone who doesn't show up consistently, you start living in emotional droughts. He gave you just enough affection to keep you invested, but never enough to make you feel secure. And what's dangerous about that is how quickly you start normalizing emotional crumbs. You start believing that inconsistency is passion, that confusion is chemistry, that uncertainty means potential. Healing requires unlearning those illusions. It demands you see the truth. You weren't asking for too much, he was giving far too little. This phase is quiet in ways he might never understand. While he may expect you to fall apart, stalk his social media, or try to win him back, you're doing something far more powerful. You're rebuilding. Not loudly, not with drama, but with intention. You start sleeping better. You start noticing how much lighter life feels without emotional turbulence. You start reconnecting with the friends or hobbies you neglected because you were mentally managing him more than living your life. Slowly, you begin to see that the happiness you thought came from him was actually coming from within you all along. You just didn't have the emotional space to access it. And here's what makes this healing the kind of revenge he never expected. You become someone he can no longer reach with the same old patterns. When he tries to come back out of boredom, loneliness, or ego, he won't find the version of you he once knew. He'll find someone who upgraded, someone who doesn't respond to breadcrumbs, someone who doesn't confuse mixed signals with love, someone who doesn't negotiate their self-worth for temporary attention. He'll find the strongest, most grounded, most peaceful version of you, the version he never contributed to but unintentionally helped create by exiting your life. This is the part he never sees coming. He thinks losing him will break you, not build you, but healing without him becomes the turning point where you no longer measure your value by his behavior. You return to the truth that you are the prize, your heart is valuable, your energy is powerful, your future is too bright to be dimmed by someone who couldn't show up. And the moment you fully step into that awareness, your life begins expanding in ways that have nothing to do with him, yet everything he took for granted. Healing without him becomes your greatest revenge because it forces you to shift your focus from what you lost to what you're gaining. This is about rebuilding the identity that slowly faded while you were busy trying to hold the relationship together. This is where you rediscover the parts of yourself you abandoned for love, the passions you paused, the standards you softened, the boundaries you overlooked. When you loved him, you adjusted your world to make room for him. When he left, that world felt empty. But now, that empty space becomes sacred ground for rebuilding the strongest version of you, one that doesn't shrink for anyone. During the relationship, you may have forgotten your own identity, not because you were weak, but because you cared. You showed up. You compromised. You did what people do when they're invested. And sometimes, without realizing it, you make yourself smaller to protect the connection. Maybe you said yes when you wanted to say no. Maybe you stopped asking for what you needed because you didn't want to seem too much. Maybe you accepted inconsistency because you were afraid that calling it out would push him away. These small shifts don't happen overnight. They happen slowly, subtly, so quietly that you don't even notice how much of yourself you've given up. When he's gone, what hurts the most isn't just losing him. It's realizing how disconnected you became from yourself. Healing means reversing that. It's the process of returning home to the version of you that existed before the relationship, and then going even further to become someone wiser. You begin to make choices not based on fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of conflict, fear of not being enough, but based on your truth. You stop prioritizing someone else's comfort over your own emotional well-being. You rebuild your voice, your confidence, your intuition, your sense of identity. And that shift is powerful because identity is the foundation of everything. Your standards, your relationships, your joy. As you rebuild, something else happens. You start remembering what you deserve, not theoretically, but deeply. You remember how good it feels to be heard, to be valued, to be chosen, to be at peace. You realize that love should not be an emotional battle or a test you keep failing. You recognize that your softness was never the problem, his inability to appreciate it was. When your self-identity strengthens, you stop romanticizing the relationship. You stop replaying the highlight reel of the good moments and start seeing the full picture, the ways you were neglected, overlooked, or made to feel like your needs were inconvenient. Rebuilding your identity also means rediscovering joy outside the context of a relationship. You reconnect with the things that make you feel alive, your hobbies, your dreams, your purpose. Healing isn't just emotional, it's behavioral. It's you showing up for yourself consistently. It's you building routines that nourish your mind and body. It's you investing time in people who reflect your value back to you, not drain it. It's you choosing activities that refill your spirit instead of emptying it. This is where your life begins expanding again, and he has no role in that expansion. And here's the real revenge he never expected. Once you rebuild your identity, you'll never accept the version of love he offered you again. Not from him, not from anyone. You outgrow him, not out of spite, but out of evolution. He becomes a chapter that served its purpose, a catalyst for your growth. And nothing is more powerful than a person who rediscovers themselves after heartbreak, because once you truly know who you are, no one gets to come back and make you question it again. Becoming whole again is one of the most powerful forms of revenge, not because it's loud or vengeful, but because it's undeniable. When you rebuild yourself, when you repair the cracks that were left by his absence or neglect, you create a version of yourself that he can no longer influence, control, or diminish. This is the core of the fourth keynote, realizing that the most devastating consequence to someone who hurt you is not anger, not tears, not confrontation. It's your wholeness, your completeness, your ability to thrive independently of them. He may have thought that your pain would tether you to him indefinitely, but the moment you focus on becoming whole, you free yourself entirely from that expectation. Healing doesn't just patch wounds, it transforms you. When you commit to becoming whole, you reclaim your identity, your confidence, your emotional independence. You stop measuring your worth by how someone treated you and start measuring it by how you honor yourself. You begin to recognize that you were never incomplete without him. You only felt diminished because you allowed your energy to be siphoned by someone who didn't value it. Reclaiming your power doesn't mean erasing him from your memory. It means understanding that his actions no longer define the narrative of your life. Your happiness becomes your responsibility, not his, and that realization is the first step toward true wholeness. This wholeness is both internal and external. Internally, it's the peace you cultivate when you no longer chase someone who isn't present, when you stop explaining yourself to people who don't appreciate your truth, And when you honor your emotional boundaries consistently, externally, it's visible in how you carry yourself, how you interact with the world, and how you allow others to treat you. People notice when someone has become whole again. There's a radiance, a stability, a confidence that can't be faked. It's the kind of energy that commands respect without demanding it, and the person who once underestimated you can sense it immediately, often too late. Becoming whole also shifts your focus from the past to the future. You stop replaying old mistakes or analyzing every detail of what went wrong. You stop asking questions like, "Why didn't he appreciate me?" or "What did I do wrong?" and start asking, "What do I want my life to feel like? And who do I want to be moving forward?" In doing so, you step into a proactive mindset where you're building a life on your terms rather than reacting to someone else's absence. That mindset is transformative. It replaces bitterness with clarity and sadness with purpose. You become someone who doesn't need validation from a person who once failed to provide it. The revenge in your wholeness lies in its quiet, undeniable impact. When you thrive, when you step into your full potential, when you live fully and vibrantly without waiting for him, it challenges his ego in a way nothing else could. He may have expected to see you broken, dependent, or longing. Instead, he sees someone who is emotionally self-sufficient, who prioritizes their own growth and joy. That realization, silent but powerful, is more potent than any confrontation or argument, because it shows him that his absence no longer carries weight in your life. Your happiness is proof of your resilience, and your independence is proof that he can no longer influence you. Ultimately, becoming whole again is not an act of spite. It is an act of self-respect. It's the conscious choice to stop allowing the past to dictate your present. It's the decision to reclaim your emotional and personal sovereignty. It's understanding that the ultimate consequence someone experiences when they underestimated or mistreated you isn't punishment. It's watching you flourish without them. And that flourishing, that reclaiming of your full, vibrant self, is the revenge they never saw coming. Because nothing wounds someone who took you for granted more than the realization that you never needed them to be complete. You were whole all along. The life you create after him is the real demonstration of your strength, and because it shifts the focus from his absence to your abundance. So often, we measure recovery by what we no longer feel: less pain, less longing, less anger. But the most powerful form of healing comes when you actively design a life that thrives without him. That life is not a reaction, it's a declaration. It's a choice to invest your energy, your time, and your heart into experiences and people that reflect your value, instead of lingering in the memory of someone who never fully appreciated you. The future you build after heartbreak becomes a silent, undeniable form of revenge because it shows him that the world didn't stop, your heart didn't break permanently, and your potential was never dependent on him. Creating a new life doesn't mean forgetting him or pretending the relationship never mattered. It means taking the lessons and the growth from that chapter and using them as building blocks for a better version of yourself. You start by identifying what makes you feel fulfilled, your passions, your dreams, your desires, and then giving them the attention they deserve. Maybe you pick up a hobby you abandoned, focus on your career, travel to places you've always wanted to explore, or reconnect with friends and family you neglected. Each step is a conscious choice to prioritize your happiness over old patterns of waiting, hoping, or revisiting the past. In doing so, you create a life that is vibrant, expansive, and undeniably yours. What makes this approach so powerful is that it doesn't rely on him noticing your progress, and it doesn't need his validation. When you build a life that reflects your worth, he may eventually see it, and that's when the impact becomes tangible. He may recognize that the woman he underestimated is now living in a way he never contributed to and cannot influence. The growth you exhibit is not about punishing him. It's about showing that your life didn't pause because he left. You didn't wither or stagnate. Instead, you flourished in ways he never anticipated, and that realization is a quiet but devastating consequence for someone who assumed his absence would control your trajectory. The new life you create also reshapes your identity. You stop defining yourself through someone else's actions, and you begin to see your worth through your own lens. You become someone who prioritizes your emotional health, sets boundaries without guilt, and pursues your goals with clarity and focus. This transformation naturally attracts people and opportunities aligned with your values and energy. It's as if by stepping fully into yourself, you magnetize what you truly deserve: love, respect, and joy that are consistent rather than conditional. Meanwhile, he remains a figure of the past, watching from the sidelines as you embody everything he failed to nurture or appreciate. Part of creating this life is also learning to enjoy your own company. Healing isn't just about filling the void left by him. It's about discovering that you don't need to rely on anyone else to feel complete. You cultivate passions, friendships, and experiences that bring fulfillment independently of anyone else's presence. That independence is magnetic. It makes you resilient and emotionally self-sufficient, and it reinforces the lesson that your happiness is your responsibility, not his, not anyone else's. Ultimately, the life you create after him is a testament to your resilience and self-worth. It's the living proof that his departure did not define your story. It's the demonstration that the person he underestimated can thrive without his approval, his attention, or his love. And that thriving is the revenge he never expected, the kind that doesn't need confrontation, doesn't need drama, and doesn't rely on proving a point. It simply exists. Your joy, your success, and your peace are louder than words, and in that you've reclaimed not just your heart, but your life. Your transformation exposes what he took for granted, and that is because it captures the essence of unexpected revenge. Most people think revenge is about anger, confrontation, or trying to make someone regret their actions. But the kind of revenge that truly leaves a mark is quiet, internal, and completely out of their control. It's not about what he feels in the moment. It's about what he realizes too late. When you heal, when you rebuild, when you create a life that doesn't depend on him, you become a living testament to his inability to value what he had. Your transformation is visible in your confidence, your happiness, your independence, and the peace that radiates from you, and it's the one consequence he never calculated or expected. When someone underestimates your worth, they assume your heart will remain accessible regardless of their behavior. They assume the energy, time, and love you've given are constants they can draw from indefinitely. They think absence or neglect will break you, and they rarely anticipate resilience. But when you transform, you disrupt that assumption. You show up as a version of yourself who is unshakable, self-sufficient, and vibrant. You demonstrate that your value was never dependent on his recognition or attention. This shift is subtle yet powerful. It doesn't need words, confrontation, or social media displays. Your life, fully rebuilt and thriving, communicates what he failed to understand. Transformation is multidimensional. Internally, it's about reclaiming your self-worth, rebuilding your emotional boundaries, and cultivating habits that support growth and peace. You become someone who no longer negotiates for crumbs of attention or tolerates behavior that undermines your dignity. You establish clarity about who you are and what you deserve, and you refuse to accept anything less. Externally, your transformation is expressed through your actions, your presence, and the life you lead. Whether it's pursuing your passions, excelling in your career, traveling, or simply smiling and living with joy, the change is undeniable. People notice it, including him, and that visibility amplifies the unspoken impact of your evolution. Part of this transformation is realizing that his failure to appreciate you reflects his limitations, not your shortcomings. Too often, people internalize rejection or neglect as a statement about their worth. But when you transform, you internalize the opposite truth. Your value was always present, it was always consistent, and it was always deserving of respect and love. The irony is that he may come to see the full extent of your growth long after he had the chance to be part of it. That delay is what makes this revenge so effective. It's quiet, powerful, and permanent. Your transformation also signals emotional independence. He can no longer manipulate your feelings, draw you into cycles of longing, or rely on your presence as emotional padding. You no longer react to his actions because your happiness is self-contained. You respond from clarity rather than need. This independence is not just protective, it's revealing. It shows him what he undervalued: a heart capable of depth, a mind capable of clarity, and a person capable of thriving without dependence on his approval. Ultimately, this illustrates that the deepest revenge isn't about causing him pain. It's about becoming a version of yourself so fulfilled, so confident, and so whole that he cannot touch it. It's about living in such a way that he regrets taking your presence, love, and devotion for granted, not through confrontation, but through the undeniable evidence of your transformation. Your life becomes a mirror reflecting what he lost and what he never earned, and that silent, unshakable reality is the revenge he never expected and cannot change. Healing without him isn't about revenge. It's about reclaiming your power, your peace, and your life. When you rise, rebuild, and transform, you become the living proof that his absence didn't break you. It made you unstoppable. That's the revenge he never saw coming, and the freedom you've always deserved.